Now let's go back to heart disease and diabetes. Are Caribbean Americans more prone to heart disease and?
Sure. Well, I would say that Caribbean Americans, clearly as a group, are at higher risk of developing diabetes, and it particularly occurs when they move from a more simple way of life to a more complex way of life, and to a society or an environment where I'd say that calories are not limiting. So let me go into a little bit more detail about that. One of the biggest risk factors for developing diabetes is obesity. And it's very clear that there are certain groups of individuals, of which Caribbean Americans are one. There are other groups, which I should say, are also at risk, such as Hispanic Americans and Asian Americans, particularly Asians from South India. But when they come into a context where there is an abundance of food and a lifestyle that would tend to make you more sedentary and less active, then we see this explosion of diabetes occurring. And then when that occurs, then it clearly very dramatically increases your risk for heart disease.
Your accolades. Let's talk about some of the awards.
I've received, as when I was a resident at Northwestern, I got the prize for the best resident. When I was at Harvard, I taught some of the students, and the year I taught one of the classes, I got the prize for the best teacher in the medical school for that particular class. And sort of professionally, I have received a couple of awards for my research. Just mention a couple of them. One is the Van Meter Award of the American Thyroid Association, which is given to a young investigator. At the time, you have to be at less than a certain age. I think it was less than 40, I believe, whose work really made very, very significant contributions to understanding thyroid disease. So I was a recipient of that award. More recently, I was elected into this organization called the American Society of Clinical Investigation, which you are nominated and you get elected in. You don't automatically get into it. And it's, you're judged based on your success in research and your sort of contributions to the general field of biomedical research. And in fact, it's from that pool of individuals that chairs of departments and deans of medical schools and things like that get selected. So it sort of puts you on a certain radar screen. And it's not unusual for me to get telephone calls or emails from people asking me to, do you want to be the chair of a department here or there or something like that. So it does put you on that sort of place of being exposed.
In 2006, the White House signed a legislation to recognize June as Caribbean American Heritage Month. How would you suggest then to the Caribbean American community to observe this occasion, and in what manner would you highlight its significance? How would you then, how best can we then celebrate ourselves?
It'd be important to highlight the history of the Caribbean and some of the similarities and differences between the history in that context and say what happened in the United States. I think it's important to highlight achievers from the Caribbean at all levels. I mean, I think everybody knows, for example, that Colin Powell had strong Caribbean roots. I think that needs to be highlighted. I think it's also important to break the stereotype. So when you talk about the Caribbean, people think a beach, people think smoking certain things, people think, you know, sort of just reggae or soca, and that's fine. And that is a part of who we are. We're a fun-loving people and we know how to enjoy ourselves. But at the same time, I think there are tremendous examples of individuals from the, what I call the Caribbean diaspora, who have been incredibly successful and incredibly influential. And it would be very important to highlight those people's achievements and to really put them up within the community as real role models, not only for people from the Caribbean, but I think for really all people of color who live in North America.
This time I'd like to give you the floor to say anything that you would like to say.
Right. That's been important. I also think that it's important to recognize that one doesn't necessarily do everything that you are in your own strength. So what do I mean by that? I think I've reached where I am because I've had tremendous support from my family, tremendous support from society. I'm a very religious person. I'm a Christian, and so I give credit to God as well for where I am. And so I think in spite of all this, what you call greatness, I think it's important to be humble. And I think with that, then who you are becomes something that I think people are much more likely to respect and are much more likely to want to aspire towards.
I see. Well, Dr. Abel, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to do this interview with us, and for that I really, really appreciate.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, sir.